Whoops. Okay, my apologies. Let me just grab a massive stack of tissues here.
Oh my gosh. Your iced latte. Like a perfect free fall. And it landed with pinpoint accuracy right on top of that U.S.-China tech war report. That is, wow, quite the mess.
Oh, please. Like, you've never done that. You're basically a professional at spilling coffee.
Okay. Guilty as charged.
Yeah, to be fair, I think I was testing gravity right before we started recording. And honestly, judging by the fluid dynamics happening on the desk right now, the diffusion rate of this coffee is way faster than I anticipated. It is fully just absorbing into the paper.
You know, it's actually absolutely fascinating watching your reaction right now, because most people, if they just completely ruined a stack of important analytical papers right before a recording, they would instantly spiral.
Oh, totally.
They would go straight into self-blame mode, you know?
Yeah.
Thinking, why am I so clumsy? Or is something wrong with my motor skills today? They would easily suffer through a solid half hour of pure self-loathing. But you're literally sitting there calmly analyzing fluid dynamics.
Well, getting mad at the past 5 seconds is only going to increase the useless entropy in the room. And more importantly, being angry doesn't dry the report. And that refusal to accept a fixed reality, you know, trying to negotiate with something that has already happened, that's the exact birthplace of mental exhaustion.
Increasing pointless entropy. I love that. And it perfectly connects to that recent epiphany our mutual buddy Mickey had regarding radical acceptance.
Oh man, Mickey's situation.
Yeah, because so much of our daily pain comes from trying to gaslight ourselves into denying reality. Whether it is a ruined document on a desk, a missed promotion, or lingering feelings for an ex, the denial is what destroys us.
Acknowledging it spilled is literally the very first step in damage control.
Exactly. You stop the internal debate and just deal with the stain.
So if you are a regular Sip and Talker, welcome back to Sip and Talk. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever time zone you are in.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we are looking at exactly this. The topic is Stop Gaslighting Yourself. The Art of Radical Acceptance. We are going to help you clear out all that mental clutter and, well, stop your brain from idling in neutral.
Right. We are moving from the physical energy of wiping up spilled coffee to the invisible, silent drain of psychological energy. Because the underlying question we really have to answer is, why did human beings evolve a brain that insists on replaying mistakes over and over again?
Yeah, it feels like a massive glitch in the human operating system. But this isn't a glitch at all, is it? I mean, it's actually an evolutionary survival mechanism.
Precisely. To understand the mechanics of this internal friction, we have to look at resource depletion theory. This was developed by the psychologist Roy Baumeister.
Right.
And his core premise is that willpower and executive function are finite metabolic resources. Like, your brain consumes about 20% of your body's glucose.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It is. And when people with internal friction personality types catastrophize or, constantly second-guess themselves, they're basically running highly complex mental simulations.
Yeah, because thousands of years ago, running a mental simulation of where that tiger might be hiding, that was literally a life or death calculation. You had to do it.
Exactly. But today, the tiger is just an unread email from your boss.
Right.
Yet the brain still burns the exact same amount of glucose to process it. So you wake up at 100% capacity, and by noon, without actually doing any physical work at all, you are neurologically depleted, just from the exhausting mental gymnastics of worrying.
Which brings up psychologist Susan Nolan-Hoeksima's concept of rumination. And I want to be super clear here because people often confuse rumination with problem solving.
Oh, they are completely different.
Yeah, problem solving is looking at the spilled coffee and asking, where are the paper towels? But rumination is obsessively looping on why something hurts. It's staring at the puddle asking, why did my hand move that way? Why am I fundamentally a clumsy person?
And what is really fascinating about rumination is how invisible that process is to the outside world. To your coworkers, you just look quietly focused at your desk. But neurologically, your brain is basically in a hurricane.
And I always think about it like thermal throttling in a computer's CPU.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, like when you run too many heavy background apps, the CPU gets dangerously hot. So to prevent the entire motherboard from melting, the system intentionally slows itself down, throttles your speed.
Right.
Rumination is thermal throttling for the human brain. We are so busy running these massive, invisible, worst-case scenario calculations. Like assuming a coworker thinks we're stupid because they didn't smile at us in the hallway.
When in reality, that coworker wasn't judging you at all. They were just zoning out, thinking about what to eat for lunch.
Exactly. But our executive function slows to a crawl anyway?
That thermal throttling analogy is perfect.
Yeah.
Because it completely explains why we feel so physically exhausted by our own thoughts. But, internal friction is really only half of the equation here. Because if rumination is your own internal software throttling your CPU, there is an external drain that is just as devastating. And that is social comparison.
But wait, let me push back on that for a second. Isn't social comparison a feature, not a bug? I mean, if I don't look upward to see what my peers are doing in the tech industry, how do I gauge my market value? Like, how do I find ambition?
Well, it absolutely started as a feature.
Yeah.
Leon Festinger outlined this perfectly in 1954 with social comparison theory. Humans naturally evaluate their worth by looking at others because, evolutionarily knowing your exact standing in the tribe was completely crucial for survival.
So it kept you from getting kicked out of the village.
Exactly. And Festinger broke it down into two categories. You have upward comparison, which is looking at high achievers to find motivation, and then downward comparison,
which is looking at those doing worse, which I guess provides a fast, temporary ego boost.
Yeah, but that ego boost from downward comparison provides zero actual growth.
It is the psychological equivalent of eating a donut for dinner. Like, it feels good for a second, but you're going to crash.
Totally. But to address your pushback, yes, in 1954, upward comparison was a healthy feature because back then, your tribe was bounded by physical geography. You compared your lawn to your next-door neighbor's lawn. You compared your career to the 50 people in your office. It was a localized, winnable game.
And then we plugged the human brain into the internet.
Precisely. A recent New York Times report highlighted how the digital era took this natural, localized survival instinct and just hyperscaled it into a global benchmarking system.
Yeah.
You are no longer comparing yourself to the person next door. You are comparing yourself to, like, an 8-year-old on a video platform who is a literal prodigy at the exact hobby you just started yesterday. It is a massive psychological mismatch. Our brains simply did not evolve to process the achievements of 8 billion people simultaneously.
It is a totally rigged game. Like, we are constantly comparing our unedited behind-the-scenes footage to someone else's heavily filtered, heavily edited highlight reel. You're sitting there comparing your 3.0 a.m. anxiety attacks in your messy kitchen to a venture capitalist's polished social media post announcing their latest massive funding round. It's an apples to holograms comparison.
That is so true. Apples to holograms. And that rigged game is exponentially amplified by a cognitive bias known as the spotlight effect.
Oh, I heard of this.
Yeah, we walk around with this intense, visceral illusion that everyone has a massive, glaring spotlight shining directly on our failures and flaws. We assume the tribe is constantly scrutinizing our every move.
Because, again, going back to the ancient tribe, if you messed up and everyone saw it, you literally got cast out into the wilderness to fend for yourself. So our brain severely overestimates how much people actually care. But what is the actual reality today?
Well, the reality is a mutual delusion of surveillance. Every single person is strictly focused on their own spotlight. Like, they are entirely consumed by their own behind-the-scenes chaos. No one is studying your flaws because they are entirely occupied hiding their own.
It is incredibly liberating to realize that nobody is actually paying attention to you.
It really is.
So we have these two massive evolutionary holdovers draining our energy. We've got the internal thermal throttling of rumination, and then the biologically mismatched scale of modern social comparison. The big question for you, the listener, is how do we bridge the gap between knowing these traps exist and actually escaping them?
Well, to bridge that gap, we have to look at how we process competing realities.
Which honestly brings us back to our mutual friend Mickey, because his recent romantic misadventures are a literal masterclass in this exact psychological affirmation.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, Mickey went through 2 distinct breakups over the last couple of years that perfectly illustrate the difference between fighting your brain and just accepting reality.
The contrast between those two events is incredibly stark.
Yeah, so let's start with breakup number 1. Mickey employed what we can call the denial strategy. He basically tried to forcefully rewrite history. He kept telling himself and aggressively telling all of us that he didn't actually like his ex-girlfriend anyway.
Right, he was trying to justify the breakup by gaslighting himself into believing he didn't care.
Yeah.
And from a clinical standpoint, Mickey was experiencing extreme cognitive dissonance.
Okay, break that down for us.
So, cognitive dissonance isn't just a fancy term for holding two conflicting beliefs. It's a physiological state of stress. The brain demands predictability. When your internal desire, like feeling love and grief, clashes with the external reality that the relationship is permanently over, it triggers a literal error signal in the brain's anterior cingulate cortex.
So an actual alarm goes off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to shut off that painful alarm, Mickey tried to alter the feeling because he couldn't alter the reality.
But you cannot forcefully delete an emotion just because it is inconvenient. It's completely backfired on him due to ironic process theory.
Ah, yes. Daniel Wegner's classic white bear problem.
Yes. If I tell you right now, whatever you do, do not think about a white bear, what is the very first thing your brain renders?
A giant white bear.
A white bear. And the mechanism behind this is just fascinating. To ensure you aren't thinking about the bear, your brain has to keep a subconscious monitoring process running in the background, constantly scanning for the bear.
Right.
And that monitoring process ironically keeps the bear right at the front of your working memory. So by Mickey trying so hard to prove to himself he didn't care about his ex, his brain had to constantly monitor his thoughts about his ex. It just crashed into his consciousness with double the force.
He was trapped in a state of constant, exhausting resistance. But then we look at breakup number 2.
Right.
A subsequent relationship ended, but this time he completely changed tactics. He utilized the acceptance strategy.
It was a night and day difference for him. He openly admitted to himself and to us that he still really liked her. Like, he didn't try to diminish the grief at all. But crucially, he accepted the harsh, objective reality that they simply were not a good fit for each other long term.
He stopped trying to unspill the coffee. In psychological terms, Mickey engaged in dialectical thinking. This is the ability to break down the rigid, binary, black and white framework our brains default to. It is the capacity to hold two seemingly opposing truths in your mind at the exact same time without the world ending.
Okay, so truth 1, the emotional fact, I deeply care for her.
Mm-hmm.
Truth 2, the practical reality, we do not work well together.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because he unapologetically admitted the truth of his emotions, the error signal in his anterior cingulate cortex finally shut off. The cognitive dissonance just evaporated.
Wow.
He no longer had to burn his daily metabolic energy proving he didn't care. He just had to do the normal human work of processing a sad goodbye, rather than fighting an unwinnable war against his own neurochemistry.
So what does this actually mean for you, the listener? Mickey stumbled into this organically through trial and error, but how can you actively replicate this kind of emotional validation in a high-stakes environment, let's say at the office where we spend the majority of our waking hours?
Well, it translates perfectly to professional environments. Let's look at the mechanics of feedback.
Yeah, there is an incredible study from UCLA researcher Matthew Lieberman, featured in Psychological Science, that explains the mechanism here. Let's say you get fiercely criticized during a project review by your boss.
Right, which happens to all of us.
Exactly. And the ancient primal instinct, the denial strategy, is to put up a wall and pretend it didn't hurt. You say, whatever, this job's a joke, their opinion doesn't matter. But the brain scans in Lieberman's research show that precision labeling of your negative emotions actually lowers the electrical activity in the brain's amygdala.
And the amygdala is the fear, anxiety, and threat detection center of the limbic system.
Right. But why does labeling work? Like, when you actually say to yourself, I feel incredibly embarrassed and professionally inadequate right now because of that criticism, you are using language. And language is processed in the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical, analytical part of the brain. By finding the precise word for your pain, you literally force the neural activity to move out of the primitive, panicking amygdala and into the rational prefrontal cortex. Naming the emotion turns down the alarm bells. Gaslighting yourself into saying, I'm fine, just traps the energy in the fear center.
That is amazing. And this neurological mechanism aligns beautifully with acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, developed by Stephen Hayes.
Oh, yeah. ACT is huge.
It is. The fundamental framework of ACT represents a total paradigm shift. The goal is never to eliminate negative thoughts.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive to everything the self-help industry sells us.
Well, completely. Because the self-help industry often sells the denial strategy. Trying to eliminate thoughts triggers the white bear boomerang effect we just talked about. Instead, the goal of ACT is to change your structural relationship with those thoughts. One of the most powerful tools in ACT is a technique called cognitive diffusion.
Let's break down the mechanics of diffusion for the Sip&Talkers.
So it is essentially a linguistic trick, but it physically rewires your reaction. Instead of saying to yourself, I am a failure, you alter the phrasing. You say, I am having the thought that I am a failure.
It sounds almost too simple, just adding the phrase, I'm having the thought that.
It is simple, but structurally profound. When you say, I am a failure, You are fusing your entire core identity with a temporary neural firing. When you say, I am having the thought, you create immediate protective distance between the observer, which is you, and the passing mental event.
That makes a lot of sense.
You realize that you are the vast sky, and the thought is just a dark cloud moving across it. You don't have to become the cloud.
That visualization gives you your autonomy back, and it pairs perfectly with the research of Dr. Kristen Neff on self-compassion. She argues that we need to treat ourselves with the exact same objective grace we would offer a friend. She breaks it down into 3 pillars.
The first pillar being self-kindness.
Yes. Self-kindness is actively stopping that brutal inner critic. Like, if your best friend spilled coffee on an important document, you wouldn't scream at them and call them worthless.
No, you'd hand them a napkin.
Exactly. We have to extend that exact same courtesy to our own executive function. The second pillar is common humanity. This is the radical recognition that suffering, failure, and missing the mark are universal realities. You are not uniquely isolated in your mistakes.
Which directly neutralizes the spotlight effect we discussed earlier.
Exactly. And the third pillar is mindfulness. This means observing the anxiety without getting entangled in it. You notice the feeling, you label it to engage the prefrontal cortex, but you refuse to let it become your permanent identity.
Now, if we want to take this from abstract theory to a highly concrete behavioral action, there is a brilliant containment strategy known as worry time.
But wait, scheduling time to worry. Doesn't that just mean I'm going to spend my entire afternoon dreading 5:00 p.m.?
Paradoxically, no. Here's the mechanism behind this 15-minute behavioral hack. If your brain insists on ruminating and comparing, you don't try to block it completely because we know that triggers the white bear effect. Instead, you grant the brain permission, but you control the boundaries.
Okay.
You literally set a calendar appointment. You say, okay, at 5:00 p.m. today, I have exactly 15 minutes scheduled to aggressively worry, panic, and compare my career to every successful prodigy on the internet.
It's like sending a formal calendar invite to your own anxiety.
It absolutely is. And if a highly intrusive worried thought pops up during an important meeting at 10 a.m., you don't fight it. You acknowledge it and tell it, I see you, but I don't have the bandwidth for you right now. Come back at my 5:00 p.m. worry appointment.
That is brilliant.
You are satisfying the brain's need to hold on to the threat, but on your terms. When 5:00 p.m. hits, you sit down and you let it rip. You worry as hard as you can. But when that 15-minute timer rings at 5:15, the meeting is forcefully adjourned. You bring your brain back to reality. This reclaims your psychological autonomy. You are no longer held hostage by random amygdala hijackings throughout the day.
That is incredibly actionable, and it really brings everything full circle for us today. Because when we synthesize all of this, Baumeister's depleted glucose, the evolutionary mismatch of global comparison, the error signaling and cognitive dissonance, the grand takeaway is that internal friction and rumination are not personal defects.
No, they are not signs of fitness. They are just your brain's overprotective ancient defense mechanisms running entirely too hot for the modern world.
Yes, it is your brain trying to keep you safe from tribal rejection, but severely overdoing it. So the ultimate formula for psychological freedom that we've uncovered in this Sip and Talk is this: fact plus boundary.
The fact is, unapologetically admitting your true emotion, using language to move the processing into your prefrontal cortex. And the boundary is recognizing the objective reality of the situation, just like Mickey realizing the relationship wasn't a fit or acknowledging the coffee is already spilled.
Fact plus boundary. That is how you stop the endless mental throttling and put your cognitive engine back in drive. Which leads me to a closing challenge for you. I want you to think about this as you go about the rest of your day. What would structurally change in your life if you took just 10% of the agonizing metabolic energy you currently spend on comparing your behind-the-scenes footage to someone else's highlight reel and rerouted that energy into concrete physical action?
Imagine the compounding returns on that 10% over a year.
Exactly. Think of one specific feeling or failure you're actively gaslighting yourself into denying right now. How much lighter would your brain feel if you just unapologetically admitted it existed today? Just looked at it and said, yes. That is there.
That is where genuine growth begins, right at the stark edge of acceptance.
It really is. Now, as we wrap up today's session, we need to deliver our standard show note. As always, Sip and Talk objectively explores facts, data, and psychological research to encourage independent, critical thinking. We do not criticize or hold bias toward any specific nation, group, or demographic.
Yeah.
Also, please remember that any passing mention of markets, tech industries, or venture capital funding is purely contextual for our examples and is absolutely not financial advice.
Yeah, we want to empower your executive function, not manage your portfolio.
With that said, if you had an aha moment today, we enthusiastically urge you to subscribe to Sip and Talk on whatever platform you are listening on right now. Leave us a review or share this with a friend who might be dealing with their own internal thermal throttling.
And since his romantic journey provided such a perfect framework for us today, please head over to YouTube and subscribe to our good friend Mickey's channel. It is called Mickey to Life. He has officially processed those breakups, reclaimed his mental bandwidth, and is posting some absolutely incredible travel vlogs. Go check out Mickey to Life and show him some support.
Yes, definitely check out Mickey's channel. Well, I think that is a wrap for today's Sip and Talk. Time to finally clean up the rest of this spilled coffee and accept the fixed reality that this report is officially heading to the recycling bin. Goodbye, everyone. Until next time.
Take care. Stay present.